Hello, I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer. I make guides and discussion videos about games I like, and today I want to review and highlight a new game that just released a few days ago, Eternal Strands. It's a third-person fantasy action-adventure from Yellow Brick Games, an indie developer from Canada led by Mike Laidlaw, who was a lead designer and later creative director for the Dragon Age trilogy, and before that he wrote on Jade Empire and Mass Effect. I was keeping an eye on Eternal Strands since it was announced, since I had high hopes that it would be a game I enjoy, though I do admit I was disappointed to hear that it's just an action-adventure and not a full-blown RPG. I'm an RPG enjoyer, and even more so a story kind of guy. Combat isn't really the main reason I play most games. But still, I decided to give the demo a try, and I was so impressed by the beautiful art direction, great world building, dialogue, and voice acting that I immediately bought the game after trying out the demo for just a few minutes. Before we get into the proper review, I want to say a special thank you to my members who help keep this channel running. I'd really appreciate it if you'd consider joining the channel as a member to support me and unlock perks like early access to videos. Joining is very much appreciated, but not required. I am always thankful even if you just take the time to like the video and maybe leave a comment. Back to the review. If you're just interested in whether I recommend the game or not, it highly depends on what your personal preferences are. But here's my TLDW. If you enjoy action adventures like God of War or Shadow of the Colossus or whatever other such games are out there, then you'll probably like Eternal Strands too. On top of the regular hack and slash and attacking weak spots and climbing on huge enemies bits, there's also an interesting system where different elements interact, parts of the environment are destructible, and you can combine your magical abilities to take down your enemies. I do think Eternal Strands does a good enough job of making itself stand out in comparison to other games in the genre with the system, although I'm not sure just how good the end result is for someone who regularly plays action adventures. For me, personally, the combat was too slow and the gear progression too grindy. If you don't like action adventures, you may still enjoy Eternal Strands if, like me, you're interested in good world building and storytelling. I'm really only playing this game for the story, as well as a tiny bit for the satisfaction of getting rare resources to upgrade my gear with. For me, the story and setting are good enough that I'm willing to put up with the grindy combat, which is not my cup of tea, so maybe that will also be the case for you. If there's a demo still up on Steam by the time you watch this review, I encourage you to give it a shot and see how you like it. Finally, I think some people may be put off a bit by the more high fantasy vibes of Eternal Strands. The world is bright and colorful even when there's danger, and the NPCs in your adventuring band may be a bit too warm or friendly for your liking. I personally enjoyed the way this tone is executed in the game. I don't think it's over the top, and I think it very much fits the overall vision. I'm only mentioning this here because I did notice a few Steam user reviews that talked negatively about the NPCs, and they initially made me a bit hesitant to buy the game because the characters were one of the main reasons I was interested in the game at all. I don't know what those players were on about, frankly. Eternal Strands manages to do what a game like Veilguard wished it could have done, which is that it captures the vibe of a fun D&D party and lets you feel like you're part of it by having your character already have a set background. You do get to choose different things in dialogue to express your character's personality in a way you like, and that's very nice. The NPCs also react to your different dialogue choices, and these are the kinds of little details I love. Anyway, if you hate fun and always need everything to be dark and edgy, just go play something else and don't complain that the clearly high fantasy colorful action adventure dares to be, gasp, high fantasy. Now for the proper review. I'll discuss in more depth the visuals, gameplay, story, audio, and performance of the game. I have to start with the visuals because they really are quite stunning. It's probably the first thing that really strikes you when you start playing. I actually was sold on the game from when I booted up the demo and watched the opening cutscene, which is done in a cool 2D animation style, similar to The Legend of Vox Machina or Avatar: The Last Airbender or Legend of Korra. I really love this style. It's very nostalgic for me, and the cutscenes were very clearly made with a lot of love towards these types of animated films or shows. I also very much enjoy the character portraits, or, well, busts that appear whenever you're talking to someone. They're very well done, and also have slight variations based on the character's attitude or feelings, which I thought was a nice touch. Not that the 3D visuals are bad by any means, but I find that these 2D cutscenes absolutely steal the show. The 3D environments and models are fine, but I can't say they're anything special. I like the style of the environments, which reminds me a little bit of Genshin Impact, which, if you ignore the gacha system, is actually quite a fun game to play in terms of story, combat, and exploration. I think that the small enemy types could look a bit more interesting visually speaking, and have maybe a bit more texture to them. The boss type enemies look very cool, but the small ones are far too boring in comparison. Still, overall, the 3D visuals are nice enough to look at. One more thing I want to highlight is how nice and clean the UI looks, while still having a bit of that magical flair associated with fantasy. I care a lot about UI and will actually just stop playing or refuse to play altogether games that have terrible and/or cluttered UI. I'm very happy to say that Eternal Strands has simple and beautiful looking UI that doesn't get in your way while enhancing the high fantasy atmosphere with its design. I will add a little caveat at the end of this section to mention that I don't personally need games to look amazing to enjoy them. I'm especially not a big fan of ultra realism, but I do like stylized graphics in games and good UI, so I'm glad Eternal Strands went in this stylized high fantasy direction. Your mileage may vary though, so do keep in mind I'm not the best person to talk about graphics. So I recommend looking at some more gameplay footage and perhaps watching a couple more reviews from people who actually care about graphics. Next up, the main thing that I personally love and look for in most games, the writing. While this is an action-adventure, I have to say that it has very solid writing. The world building is interesting and I would definitely love to see the setting explored more in the future. The dialogue is well done, with each character's personality shining through, though of course that's also helped by the great voice acting. My favorite characters are Bird Mom, aka Oria, and cute Scottish Quartermaster, aka Casman. I haven't yet completed the entire game, so I can't talk about how well executed the rest of the story is, and how satisfying the ending is, but I can say that so far I've enjoyed it. I would have personally preferred more of a focus on story and see that story expanded, but I understand that it's slightly easier for an action-adventure to be made by an indie company instead of a longer and more complex story-heavy and choice-heavy experience. Cutscenes are expensive to make, so less story means less cutscenes most of the time. Choices with consequences are also expensive, and so on. Moving on to gameplay, you do two main things in the game: explore the area and find resources, and kill enemies, both small and large. By killing enemies, you'll get various crafting resources, but when you kill bosses, you also get a particular type of resource called a strand, which you use to unlock and upgrade your magical abilities. While it can be fun to freeze or burn enemies and sometimes make use of the environment to deal with them, the combat does feel a bit one-note for me. As an RPG player, I'm used to having multiple types of attacks and abilities, and being able to specialize in a certain style of abilities to create my own build. In Eternal Strands, at least so far, you have to at the very least upgrade all your spells because some will be required to progress through the main story. You have to craft gear with various resistances for similar reasons so that you can traverse various environments with extreme temperatures or deal with boss enemies that have elemental abilities. I think possibly the only area where you have a bit more freedom, at least as far as I can tell after 6 hours, are the weapons. You have a sword and shield, a bow, and a bit later also unlock a two-handed weapon. Not really sure whether you can only choose to use one of these weapons throughout your playthrough, as it certainly seems like you wouldn't be able to use a bow if you're clambering up on a boss enemy like a huge automaton or dragon. Personally, I didn't bother using the bow much and mostly focused on upgrading my melee weapons. The combat for me has frankly already gotten stale for a few reasons. For one, there's not much that you can change other than improving your damage and defenses when crafting or upgrading gear. You can slowly gain new magical abilities as you progress through the main story and can upgrade those abilities by killing the same bosses you already killed again. Look, I'm not sure if this is how combat in these types of games generally is since I'm an RPG player, but as it stands, to me it's not exactly a good sign that I've already gotten bored of the combat after 6 hours, and I find it tedious whenever an enemy attacks me or God forbid I have to fight another boss. I will likely tough it out to see where the story goes, but I might just give up on finishing it myself at some point if the combat portions make the game drag out for too long. Finishing the story is pretty much the only reason I'm playing it. In terms of exploration, exploring an area for the first time is decent, maybe even a bit fun. Other than the few landmarks dotted across the area, however, the environment ends up looking a bit samey and not particularly inspiring. It's fine, but after running around for 10 minutes, you've essentially seen everything the area has to offer visually speaking, and other than chests, codex entries, blueprints, and enemies to kill, there's just natural resources to harvest, but that's about it. Compared to the 2D cutscenes and the character designs, the environment is quite lacking, not just visually, but also in terms of level design, as it's just not that interesting to traverse each area. Again, not really sure whether this is something that's a big focus in action adventures. Maybe it isn't, and you're just supposed to focus on the killing monsters part, which for me isn't that interesting. I do like the crafting system, which gives you some flexibility in terms of which stats you want to improve on your weapons and armor. I'm not entirely sure how important the defensive stats are because they aren't explained very well in game. Armor is probably the easiest one to figure out, as I assume it reduces the physical damage you take. Fire and cold resistance, however, I'm really not sure about because these extreme elements and temperatures seem to have a delay, a time during which you are somewhat affected by them but aren't yet taking damage. Do the resistances increase this time you have before you start taking damage? Do they just reduce the fire or cold damage dealt to you? Both? I really have no idea if these resistances do anything. I certainly went ahead and crafted separate cold and fire resistance armors as I thought they'd help me in different situations, but I can't say I noticed much of a change. Maybe it took longer until I started taking cold or fire damage. Maybe it's also because I'm playing on easy and these stats are more relevant on higher difficulties. Just so I don't leave the gameplay section on a sour note, a cool detail is that the colors of your armor can change based on the materials you use to craft it. Yes, I know, very serious gamer TM things, but I think it's quite important to like the look of your character as you go on monster slaying adventures. In terms of audio, I've already mentioned that the voice acting is very good. Honestly, it's quite close to good AAA or AA voice acting. And I did a little digging on IMDb and found out that indeed some of the voice actors have performed in big games like Baldur's Gate 3, The Witcher 3, Dragon's Dogma 2, the Dragon Age trilogy, and a bunch of other well-known and good games. Really glad to see that Yellow Brick Games managed to secure such good voice talent for Eternal Strands because it shows that they care about quality. The soundtrack has been amazing so far, and it's no surprise, seeing as Austin Wintory composed it, and he's made other great game soundtracks in the past, like the one for Stray Gods or all the Banner Saga games. I generally took a few minutes to listen to what I assume is the main theme in the main menu, because it just sounded so good. I was particularly impressed as well with the quality of the audio mixing, because I found that to be a problem in some of the indie games I've played and enjoyed. But everything was at the right level. There are volume sliders for multiple types of sounds like voices, effects, ambient stuff, and music, and overall everything sounds crisp and high quality. Finally, I've left performance for last. For me, the game ran pretty smoothly. I didn't play with everything at the highest settings graphically because I have a computer that's a few years old, and I don't want to overwork it. I also had to turn down post-processing due to the fact that I get headaches and feel nauseous from bloom and motion blur effects, and the only way to turn those off was to turn the post-processing to the low setting as far as I could tell. In my 6 hours of playtime, I only had one crash that happened when I entered a new area and probably did too many things at the same time while the characters were talking. Thankfully, I basically didn't lose any progress, just had to travel back to that area, and that was that. I didn't have any major issues other than that, so I'm quite impressed at the fairly stable state the game seems to have released in. Obviously, this may differ on other people's PCs, so if you're concerned about it, just read through some more Steam user reviews or watch other reviews on YouTube, and I'm sure you'll be able to figure out whether the game's performance will be up to your personal standards. For me, it's been more than good enough. Though do keep in mind, I play a lot of older games which do tend to have quite a few technical problems like crashes and other bugs, so they don't bother me that much. All in all, Eternal Strands is a fun adventure set in a fantasy world fascinating enough that I wish the game was a full RPG. Despite not being a fan of action adventures, I enjoyed my time with it so far and will likely continue to play it until I finish my playthrough. It's a bit grindy or maybe not very well balanced, or maybe I'm just bad at this type of combat, which makes it feel extra grindy to me. But the story is good enough that it makes me want to keep playing despite the game's flaws, and that's always a win in my book. If you play the game yourself, I'd like to hear what your experience was, especially with the combat and gear, because I'm wondering if I'm just extremely bad at it and that's making my experience worse. And the story and characters, of course. Who's your favorite band member? Let me know down below. As always, if you're looking forward to more videos about RPGs and other games I like, do remember to subscribe, and leave a like and comment while you're at it too. They really help. This has been B Tier Mutineer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.